First, I want to say that John Coffey was born in Virginia, Prince Edward County, Virginia. He was born on June the 2nd, 1772. By 1804, he was with Andrew Jackson in Davidson County, Tennessee at Nashville. One thing, if you've got that Doublehead book, if you read it closely, you'll find that shortly after being in Nashville in 1804, somehow or another he got with John D. Chisholm, and we was on the Chisholm Road a while ago. We're not going to go to the Chisholm Cemetery. It's taking longer than we thought. We had too much. We bit off too much to chew at one time. So John Coffey was one of the most important historical figures in this area ever. But what I was fixing to tell you, on August the 3rd, if you look in that Doublehead book, on August 3rd, 1807, John Coffey was listed as one of the leasees on the Doubleheads reservation. And he may have leased this land here because John Chisholm's place is on up that way. Now, John Chisholm was working with Doublehead. We know that John Chisholm first met Doublehead or verified met Doublehead at the Treaty of the Holston in 1791, because both he and Doublehead, John Chisholm and Doublehead, are on the treaty. But anyway, John Coffey, starting about 1807, started working with Thomas Freeman. Now, he was a surveyor general, and he was stationed in Huntsville. Now, Huntsville was, of course, one of the first counties in Mississippi Territory. It was established actually as a county on December the 13th, 1808. And most people think, wow, that's awful early. What happened is the white movement, or white settlers, spread like wildfire. By 1801, there was only 5 Cherokees left on the Little Tennessee River Valley, where the Overhill towns were located. By 1806, on January the 7th, 1806, Doublehead had signed the treaty giving up the Cherokees' claim to the area that became Madison County. The Chickasaws had given up the year before in 1805, July, I think, in 1805. The Chickasaws had signed that treaty. But anyway, on December 13th, 1808, Madison County was created. But before it was created, John Coffey, Thomas Freeman, Returned J. Meigs, agent for the Cherokees, General James Robertson, agent for the Chickasaws, met at Chickasaw Island in Huntsville and laid out Madison County. So Coffey was familiar with this area. He was doing surveying in this area. And like I said, he actually leased land from Doublehead. His name is on that lease list. He married in 1809. In August the 30th, 1813, the Red Stick Creeks attacked Fort Mims. I told you a little bit a while ago that William McIntosh actually fought with Coffey at Horseshoe Bend. And he was, Minowall was at Horseshoe Bend. He was the leader of the Red Sticks at Horseshoe Bend. He actually escaped at that battle, but the Battle of Horseshoe Bend is probably one of the heaviest casualties of Indian people of the history of this country. Besides, if you believe what DeSoto Chronicles wrote, they killed 2,000 or 3,000 Creeks at Mobile. That may be the heaviest casualty, but there was 1,800 wounded and several hundred that were 800 killed and several hundred that were wounded at Horseshoe Bend. But anyway, Coffey takes his group and he goes to Huntsville, and after that first major skirmish with the Red Stick Creeks, the people in Huntsville was fearing for their lives. As they say, there was over 1,000 people from Huntsville that went back to Nashville for security purposes. But Coffey come in with his group of people, and Andrew Jackson came out of Fayetteville, Tennessee with his group of people, and they united there and went from there to the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. And in May of 1814, the whole group returned back to Huntsville, and the troops kind of camped on the yard of Poplar Grove, which was Leroy Pope's mansion that had been completed. It's one of the largest and the earliest plantation mansions in the state of Alabama. But anyway, the Battle of Horseshoe Bend was culminated on March the 27th, 1814, and that's the time that Minowall escaped. And Minowall was the one that actually had William McIntosh killed. Coffee went from there to the Battle of New Orleans on the 8th of January 1815. The Treaty of Ghent, which resolved the whole war conflict, was signed on December the 24th, 1814. So they were fighting among themselves, and the treaty had already been signed between the United States government and Great Britain. So it was a useless war, but Coffee won that war. Coffee, when he met at Huntsville with Jackson, and I missed that, there's a map that shows you the Black Warrior Town that was burned by Coffee in October 1813. So Jackson ordered a bunch of forts to be built along the Tennessee River to protect the people in Madison County. One of them was Camp Coffee, Fort Deposit. There's several, I can't. But anyway, Camp Coffee is shown on the map. If you look at that, it was on the south side of the Tennessee River, right next to George Fields, who was a Cherokee that also fought in the Creek Indian War. He was wounded at the Battle of Talladega, shot through the chest, and he had to set him up to keep him from suffocating to death. Believe it or not, he lived, and he lived long enough to make it to Indian Territory. Coffee was responsible for surveying the Indian boundaries for the treaties. And you notice in 1816, on 2 occasions, he had come from Huntsville, he had stopped at Black Fox's, which is on the west side of the Browns Ferry. From where Browns Ferry nuclear plant was, there was a ferry that was operated by Captain John Brown. And that's where the name Browns Ferry came from Captain John Brown. But anyway, Coffee would stop at Black Fox, and I call him Black Fox too, because the chief of the Cherokee Nation, which was Old Black Fox, died in 1811. So his son in 1816 was running a stand or a tavern or a trading post, and in Coffee's diary he tells about trading with Black Fox. Now if you follow Black Fox after 1816, after the Turkeytown Treaty of 1816, some of the Cherokees in this area went to the east to the Cherokee Nation, which was the edge of Morgan County, the eastern edge of Madison County, and that stayed part of the Cherokee Nation. Garner stayed part of the Cherokee Nation until 1838. But anyway, Coffee was primarily responsible for doing all the surveys. I think he surveyed Melton's Bluff for Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson purchased, the Turkeytown Treaty was done September the 16th through the 18th, 1816. And on November the 22nd, 1816, David Melton signed a deed to Andrew Jackson, and Andrew Jackson became the first white legal landowner outside of Madison County in northwest Alabama. That treaty ceded the land that became Lauderdale Limestone, Franklin, Lawrence, Morgan, in the southwest corner of Madison County. That was the Turkeytown Treaty of 1816. But anyway, on November the 22nd, 1816, like I said, David Melton, who was a son of John Melton, who was an Irishman, and Akuma, who was the sister of Doublehead, signed the deed giving Jackson and John Hutchinson the control of Melton's Bluff. But there's one other thing I wanted to show you, and Coffee was assigned to survey Melton's Bluff. There was 2 other girls that was involved in that deal, and their handwritten letter, they signed with an X. If you look at these little handouts you got, you'll see a letter that is signed by Elizabeth Melton. Now she was one of the daughters of John and Akuma Melton. She signed away, both of these, Nancy and Elizabeth Melton, signed off for Jackson and John Hutchinson, the Melton's Bluff plantation. Now he kept that plantation to Andrew Jackson kept the plantation to 1827 when he was running for president. On March 29th, 1817, John Coffee was selected by the United States Secretary William Crawford as a Surveyor General for the Northern District of Alabama Territory. And he did nearly all the surveying of the cities, the towns, and he and Thomas Freeman together actually did the boundary between Mississippi and Alabama. Go back up just a minute. I said that Madison County was the first county in Mississippi Territory. The other 2 counties were not recognized until 1812, and that was Mobile and Washington counties. So in Mississippi Territory included all the states, all the area of Alabama and Mississippi. Here is an interesting map. Coffee hired two men that were very instrumental, and one of them was Hunter Peel and Ferdinand Sononer. Okay, Sononer, good, I'm glad you told me that. But Sononer and Peel, Hunter Peel, did this map in 1816 or 1817, and on this map it shows the Muscle Shoals. Of course, the big Muscle Shoals is where Wheeler Dam is located, and it's about 15 miles in length. Wheeler Dam is actually about 6 miles from the eastern end of Big Muscle Shoals. There's three things on this map that stands out to me because I know of family relationships. One is Doublehead Spring, which if you're standing at the mouth of Blue Water Creek, the bank will turn and go into a little pocket, and then it will come out by a bluff line. That little pocket is actually Doublehead Spring that's shown on this map. I've been there, I've seen that. The next thing that's important on this is Big Nance's Creek. Now, Big Nance was a sister of Doublehead. That's historically recorded in two occasions. One occasion is where she sues John D. Chisholm for 3 slaves that she claims were hers, and she was listed on that as Big Nance. She also writes a letter to Return J. Meigs telling about her and the Badger getting a divorce and telling how sorry he is and don't you believe a word he says. So there's 2 references to Big Nance. Prior to Big Nance moving to the mouth of the creek at Green's Bluff, the creek was called Pathkiller's Creek. Now, also right here on this little map is Town Creek. When General James Wilkinson did the 1802 map of Muscle Shoals, and it's back here in the back, and you can look at that map at the very back page, and you can see exactly where he said the homes of Catagiski and Doublehead. So he showed those homes being right there at the junction. You can drive down, there's a little turnaround, a cul-de-sac down there at the bottom now where Shoaltown was located. Shoaltown is mentioned 2 historical, Captain Edmund Pendleton Gaines, I think he became a general. I'm not sure if he was a brigadier general or a full major general, whatever. Yeah. But anyway, he's got 2 forts named after him, one on the Chattahoochee River and one at Dauphin Island. They're all called Fort Gaines. But anyway, Town Creek was on that Wilson map called Shoaltown Creek. It says it's 50 yards wide on his map. It actually specifically says how wide the creek was. Another thing he says that the creek, the river at that section was 16 inches deep all the way across. So we think of the Tennessee River as being extremely deep. Now, I've got a picture, and some lady asked me to post some pictures of it, but there's a picture of Walker's Island, which if you look at that map at Lock 6, you'll see where Walker's Island is located. It's just above where Wilson Dam is located on Little Muscle Shoals. There's a picture there of 2 wagons crossing the Tennessee. You've seen that picture. Sure. 2 wagons crossing the Tennessee River right there on Walker's Island. But anyway, let me see what else I want to say. You could write about a book about coffee. Of course, this was a Hickory Hills plantation. He owned 1,280 acres right here. He had 83 slaves at his death, and most of them are buried in that cemetery, and that's what that historic marker tells you about those slaves. Now, here's a picture that I think most of you have seen before. This is a picture of John D. Chisholm's tavern at Knoxville. He was right behind William Blount. William Blount was the governor of Mississippi Territory. Of Southwest Territory. Southwest Territory was south of the Ohio River and west of the Appalachians. So this area was part of Southwest Territory at one time. John Chisholm we were going to go to his cemetery. It's located about 5 miles from, I guess, Cox's Creek Boulevard, right up the Chisholm Road. It'll be on the left side on the west side of the road in front of a house. And you knew the people that lived there, didn't you, Hayes? All right, John Chisholm, I want to say this. John Chisholm was a Scotsman or Irishman, or Scots-Irish. He was described as being red-headed, bright red-headed, and very large man. He loved to fight. He loved to brawl. He actually was married to 2 mixed-blood Indian women. One of them was Martha Holmes, and the other was Patsy Brown. Now, she was the daughter of Captain John Brown, of Browns Ferry in Lawrence County. He also had a ferry at Moskin Bend at Chattanooga, and of course people moved west. Also on this, I'm going to go back to this map one more time. Also moving west was at this place where I said that Wilkerson pointed out Doublehead and Cattegiski. John Watts Jr. is thought to be that Cattegiski. Now it's not positive, but his name was called Killikaskia or something like that, John Watts Jr. And John Watts Jr. was, he became the second chief of the Chickamauga faction of Cherokees, the first being Dragon Canoe. And then John Watts, some people say that he died in 1808, and other folks claim that he died in 1802. But regardless of what happened, Doublehead became the primary Chickamaugan chief of the Chickamauga faction. Now, after he was assassinated on August 9th, 1807, the Glass that I was talking about a while ago, Thomas Glass, and if you look at the early records of Lawrence County land records, the Glass family had actually, in the early 1800s, entered land in Lawrence County. Now, they didn't stay there. After 1820, there was no Glass people found in Lawrence County. But Thomas Glass was the one that committed the, no, it was DeWall that committed the massacre, but Thomas Glass, I included this letter of December the 8th, 1796. James McHenry, Secretary of War, had sent a payment for John D. Chisholm for his services to Blunt. There's other letters in the War Department papers about John Chisholm getting paid. And of course, John Chisholm was a very historic figure. He was threatened with his life. Matter of fact, he was wounded when they were fixing to leave here. But in February and January of 1810, there was a bunch of Cherokees, I think it was 1,131, that were issued permits to go west, and they became the old settlers of the Cherokees West. John Chisholm went with that bunch because the Chickasaws had already wrote a letter that they were going to kill him. They said, if you don't take care of him, we'll take care of him ourselves. So John Chisholm goes west. He goes to Washington, D.C., representing the Western Cherokees. And then in 1818, when this land opened back up, he was one of the first ones that claimed over 1,200 acres of land to the north of here where he's buried at Chisholm Cemetery. And if you want to go to Chisholm Cemetery, you know, it's up the road. But anyway, has anybody got any questions at this point? Yes.